Thanks for being here today. My name is Jody Zarambi. Some of you might know me as Jazzy Mitchell. I am the publisher for Launch Point Press. In conjunction with my sister press, Desert Palm Press, we're providing these live stream events for you. And today we have some fabulous writers. Before we get to that, I wanted to let you know that if you're watching this live, we welcome you with providing comments and questions. Just type it out right underneath the video you're watching right now, and we'll get them. So today, as I said, we have 5 great writers. Let me introduce them to you. First off is Natty Burns. Second is Jane Alden. Then we have Edith Zeitlberger.
Hello.
Special guest, Alicia Gael. So welcome to all of you today. What we're going to do is we're going to have them read for you, and then we'll get to know them a little bit more about what's going on with their stories. And if we have time, we'll even find out what was inspiring for them, why they even wrote them to begin with. Can't wait to listen to that, especially with some of these storylines that you'll hear today. So first off, we're going to hear from Jane Alden, who will be reading from The Queen's Eye, which is going to be released soon. Go ahead, Jane.
Thank you, Jody. It releases June the 6th, actually. And here it is, cover.
No, it looks great.
The Queen's Eye is a sequel, number 2 in a series about an archaeologist, and that she and her assistant Ari are searching for the missing eye from Nefertiti's bust. The famous Nefertiti bust is missing her left eye. And common wisdom is that maybe it never existed, but Cass believes that it did exist, and they set out to find it. It's not without danger, however, their quest, because there are people trying to foil them finding it. And the scene I'm going to read from has Ari discovering for the first time exactly how dangerous this might be. The conductor tweeted his whistle to signal final boarding, and a porter took my bag and helped me up the sleeper car's metal steps, leading to a narrow hallway with a line of doors into small staterooms. Mine was halfway down. The interior of the stateroom was from a past era. The carpet was worn threadbare, a miniature sink supplied only a trickle of water, and the security chain on the door was broken. If Cass were here, she'd say, "It's clean and it'll get us where we're going." I had barely gotten settled when the train lurched ahead. We were leaving on time, a good sign. We rattled south along the Nile through the Cairo suburbs and past the great pyramids of Giza silhouetted against the moon. There was a knock on the stateroom door. "Yes, just a minute." I fumbled for my dictionary and opened the door. It was the conductor. "Ticket, please." He inspected my ticket, punched it, and handed it back. My stomach rumbled. "Oh, sorry. Is the dining car open?" I pantomimed, raising a fork to my mouth in case he had reached the limit of his English. "Yes, madam." He pointed up the hallway. "Next car forward." I duck walked along the narrow hallway against the swaying motion of the old coach and opened the sliding door at the end of the car. The rumbling noise of wheels on the tracks and a cold blast of air rushed in the open doorway. The maitre d' seated me in the dining car at a small table with a white tablecloth, draped a napkin in my lap with a flourish, and placed a menu in front of me. Thank goodness it had English subtitles. I ordered a green salad, soup, a roll with butter, and a glass of white wine. Egyptians grow fantastic lettuce and tomatoes. The delicious salad brought up a memory of the special dinner Cass and I shared on our balcony at the Winter Palace Hotel, the night we first made love 6 months ago in Luxor. I was savoring the salad and the vision of Cass's incredible breasts when the sudden roar of the tracks caught my attention. Someone had opened the door at the back of the dining car. I turned and saw a bearded man holding open the door. His long cotton robe snapped around his ankles in the rush of wind. While I watched, he turned toward me and gave an oddly piercing look, then disappeared into the darkness outside the car. Was that creepy, or was I being paranoid? Did he have some connection with the warning letter Cass got in Berlin? I finished my dinner and wine and went back to the sleeper car. No sign of the guy in the robe. Because the security chain inside my stateroom didn't work, I propped my suitcase against the door. Not that the case would stop someone who really wanted in, but having a barrier there made me feel better. I crawled in my bunk, fully clothed, and spent the longest night of my life. You would think the swaying motion of the train might be soothing, like being rocked in a cradle, but every jerk felt like a minor earthquake. I slept in fits and finally gave up as the sky turned light enough for me to make out the date palms lining the riverbank beside the railroad tracks. There came a door knock so faint, I wasn't sure at first I'd really heard it. I waited, and the second came. Yes. Ticket, please. Again? Just a minute. I moved my suitcase aside and opened the door. The man in the cotton robe who gave me the fishy look was standing there, pointing a gun at my heart. The muzzle looked as big as a cannon. I gasped and reflexively stepped backward, stumbling over the suitcase. He snatched me to my feet, poked the gun in the small of my back, and forced me out the door into the hallway. He shoved me toward the back of the car leading to the caboose. This all happened within a few seconds, but the scene seemed to play out in slow motion. 100 thoughts crowded my brain at the same time. Should I yell for help? He's not that big. He's about my height. He did seem strong when he jerked me up off the floor, but maybe I could take him if I spun around. But a quick move would startle him, and he might jerk the trigger. Should I pull the emergency braking cord? Would a sudden stop throw me forward or him backward or both? I should have paid better attention in high school physics class. Whichever, the force might cause him to pull the trigger. While these thoughts were spooling through my mind, he let out a surprised grunt and staggered backward. The gun flew out of his hand. I whirled to see another man with his arm around my assailant's neck. He was the man who followed Cass and me at the Christmas market in Berlin. The two fell to the floor and grappled in the narrow space, first one on top and then the other. The guy in the robe broke away, snatched up the gun, and made for the door leading to the caboose. The other guy caught up with him, and they both plunged through the opening into the darkness outside. I heard a shout, a mix of surprise and fear, then silence. I stood plastered against the wall, frozen, with my mouth open. The Berlin guy came back through the door, smoothing his hair and straightening his tie. He brushed past me without a word and exited through the opposite end of the car. I ran inside my stateroom and slammed the door, frantically looking around for a defensive weapon. I grabbed a ballpoint pen. Lame, but the only thing at hand. I propped the suitcase against the door and sat on the floor with my back braced against it. I wasn't looking forward to telling Cass what had happened. So much for my boast that I could take care of myself. If the Berlin guy hadn't intervened, who knows what the man in the robe had in mind for me? And was the Berlin guy saving me, or was the fight over who got the privilege of doing me in? While I was mentally composing my narrative to Cass, the train slowed. The landscape began to change from rural patches of farmland to scatterings of country houses to tightly packed apartment buildings and shops. Donkey carts loaded with sugarcane trotted alongside the tracks, headed for markets in Luxor. A knock on the door behind my head startled me so badly I practically levitated off the floor. Luxor Station, madam.
Wow, that was awesome, Jane. Thank you for reading that. Really exciting too. Just poor Ari. Just on a train and is getting attacked and then saved and has no idea what's going on there. I'm looking forward to seeing the published version of that, Jane. I'm certainly glad that it's coming out soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we are going to hear from Natty Burns. Natty, go ahead and tell us about the book and set up the scene for us.
Sure. I Several years ago I published. I'm a Desert Palm Press author. I published this book with them called The Rustle of Leaves, and Lee Fitzsimmons, who runs Desert Palm Press, said, "Write me a horror story." So I had this kind of started, and I finished it, and it's a serial killer type thing, but it's not too gory. So anyway, later, she came to me and said, "I would like you to write a prequel or a sequel to The Rustle of Leaves." So the prequel to Rustle of Leaves appeared in Tales from Under the Desert Palm. So anyway, I'm going to read from this, the short story that is a prequel to The Rustle of Leaves. The shine was heavy on her, they said, and it terrified most of them, those God fearing people in her small Louisiana hometown. Some, like her Aunt Tilda, were impressed, awestruck by the 3-year old's spot on premonitions. If she couldn't see someone's face anymore, it was time to plan the funeral. A fact proven time and again. When the family got together for holidays or church socials, Tilda was the one watching young Adeline Sharp, and she was the first to ask what the girl was seeing when she suddenly stilled and stared. Others in the town of Baster saw the sudden stillness, the visions, as the devil's work. Their firm admonitions to Ada's mother were brief and to the point. Raise that child in the firm guidance of God. It would be the only way to save the child's soul from evil. The formidable Edith Mace Sharp had to agree. If she was honest with herself, her second oldest child's ability to see the dead and predict the future frightened her. This startling ability did not appear anywhere else in the Mace or Sharp family lines, and a part of her easily believed an Antichrist was indeed influencing the child. Deacon Geoffrey Sharp was not so afraid, however. He thought that perhaps it was angels who spoke to his daughter, and that their messages might be benevolent, might be helpful. He also thought that maybe others needed to hear what the angels were saying. So a cottage industry was born in which little Adeline would touch people and tell them what the angels said to her. There was a donation, of course, a fee that would help take care of God's tiny inspired messenger. Adeline learned early on to say what people wanted to hear. Luckily, the shadow folk who spoke to her told her the right things to say, things that brought smiles to people's faces and money into her father's hands. When Adeline's mother tried to step in and protest that what the child was doing could be of the devil, Deacon Geoffrey laid down the law with a firm slap of the hand. As the man of the house, he represented everything that God wanted for the Sharp family. He would decide what was evil and what wasn't. Adeline knew then that she had to protect her little sister Reese. She too had the shine, but it was their deep secret. Adeline taught her how to pretend she didn't have it. No one, neither father nor mother, could know about it. Mother would condemn it, and father would use it to their advantage. Adeline understood that she also had to pretend to ignore the messages and visions the devil sent whenever her mother was around. She surely never told her about them or even offered this information unbidden to anyone as she grew older. Sharing the information to the old ramshackle coal shed behind their house trailer, where she'd be severely caned and locked away. After the caning by her deeply offended mother, the next few hours were to be spent in prayer and reflection, facing the black smeared coal bin until it was felt that she had pushed away the evil dominating her spirit. Sometimes her mother forgot about her for a goodly length of time, and her father or sister would come looking for her. As the slatted door was locked from the outside, her only companions as she awaited her family's rescue were the toads and the salamanders that snuck inside, and the ever present minions of the evil one. Silence was a tool young Adeline learned to use to her advantage. In the deep silences of her denial, she studied the abilities she possessed. The premonitions whispered to her were amazing in their veracity. Even something as simple as the plate she knew her mother would drop and break at supper time. Adeline knew what night the gumbo would burn, and so ate a larger lunch that day. And those people she saw daily, those dead, shadowy ones, They told her things. They told her what books she should read at the elementary school library and how she should hide them from her parents, how to tuck the books into her bedroom so no one could see the titles on the spines. The librarians at the school and later at the Crow County Public Library, busy with their own lives, just saw her as precocious, a bit odd, as everyone in town knew, but harmless. Their curious glances flew off Adeline like water on duck feathers, fading in the brightness of her smile as they date stamped her esoteric book loans. The dad also warned her about Pastor Ferguson, the elderly cleric at the Light of God's Faith Holiness Church. Adeline knew not to tell anyone about the touches. They had to be yet another secret because telling would, no doubt, bring on more caning and more wasted time. There were no books in the coal shed, books that might have kept the whispering and the darkness of the coal shed and premonitions at bay for a short time. Each long, bookless stretch in the darkness of the coal shed had only energized the shadows of the other side, making their God force ever more prevalent in her daily life. They told her that Donnie Crichton needed her.
Donnie Crichton, who's that? Oh my God, I want to know
She's coming
more.
up in the story.
Wow, that's chilling just listening to that about Adeline. I mean, you can just hear the evilness that's seeping through her and the fact that she has to have all these secrets even from a young age. And wow, that's just thrilling. Thank you for reading that.
Sure, happy to.
Next up, we're going to listen to Edith Zeitlberger. And Edith, go ahead and set up the scene for us. Tell us a bit about the book.
Of course. So the book is set in 1903, mostly in Vienna, and we have Eleanor, the Duchess of Tarnworth, who traveled with her family to Vienna from London to attend her husband's cousin's daughter's wedding, or planned wedding. And there she meets Countess Sophie von Hagendorf, and the passage I have chosen is the first encounter. Sophie let her mare race across the damp grass towards the clearing, both of them enjoying the freedom of the moment. Once they reached the top of the slope and neared the trees, Sophie saw another horse at her favorite place. So much for quiet and solitude. She could always ride by without taking a break, but why should she give up her private place of contemplation to some stranger? A woman stepped out of the foliage into the sun. Capri was as much surprised as Sophie and shied away, then reared back and threw her off. Sophie landed hard on the ground. Fortunately, she managed to roll to her left, and her right side didn't take much of the impact. The ground was still soft from the rain, but when she shifted onto her back, she felt a stab of pain in her hip. Contorting her face in pain, she closed her eyes at the sudden agony. When she opened her eyes again, the woman from the clearing stood over her, Capri's reins in hand, staring with shocked eyes. Sophie groaned at her luck. The woman had halted Capri's escape, which was indeed lucky, because Sophie had no idea how she would get home, but at the same time she felt absolutely humiliated in front of this complete stranger. Just what she needed. And what felt even worse was the woman was studying her with eyes full of concern and compassion, but also a good amount of surprise. She must have mistaken her for a man, Sophie mused. No wonder. From the distance and in her man's clothes, with her long hair confined under her hat, she surely must have appeared to be a man. While the woman was still staring, Sophie had the chance to get a closer look at her. Her hair was snow-white, short, with a stubborn lock falling over her right eye. Although the color of her hair would indicate a certain age, she wasn't very old. Her skin was pale and smooth. She had a long patrician nose, small lips, and eyes the color of a warm summer sky. Eleanor realized she had been frozen in place and took a deep breath. "When you are done gawking at me," the woman snapped, "could you hand me my cane from the saddle so I can get up?" The harsh tone, combined with the feminine voice, jerked the Duchess from her reverie. Without thinking, she took a step towards the fallen woman and was about to grab her arm to help her up, but had her hand swatted away. Seething, the woman on the ground said, "Don't touch me. Just hand me my cane. Eleanor swallowed a retort and removed the item which had puzzled her when she'd first seen it. So it was a cane. She gave it to the rude woman, who used it to struggle to her feet. The Duchess knew better than to offer an unappreciated hand again. Instead, she retrieved the bowler hat from the ground and held it out. The woman snatched it out from her hand without so much as a thank you. You're welcome, Eleanor said sarcastically. I don't need your pity. I do not pity you. I merely wanted to be helpful. Stop being helpful, she shot back. She stepped around the woman, took hold of Capri's reins, and put her foot into the stirrup to maneuver herself into the saddle. Just what I need, she muttered. Must be my bad luck day. Foreigners who think nothing of imposing. I did no such thing. Eleanor's anger sparked. She put her hands to her hips and glared at the woman on the horse. Then why are you here? She asked as she gestured at the clearing. This place belongs to the Emperor as far as I know, and he graciously allows it for public use. It is not your private property, so there is no need to be rude and impolite. If you say so. The rider swung her horse around and sped off, splashing Eleanor from head to toe in mud. Eleanor stood fuming, covered in mud and dirty water. She stared daggers at the strangers retreating back. Her hand shook with fury when she brushed a wet lock from her face. She turned on her heel and stomped back to her own horse. With an exhale of indignation, she climbed into the saddle and steered for home. Eleanor returned to the ballet on her white horse. She didn't wait for the stable hand to take hold of the reins when she dismounted and stormed inside. The Duchess slammed the door shut angrily and called out for Benson, her blood boiling. Benson! She shouted again. The man came running from the library, followed by his lordship and the Contessa, all of them wondering what had caused such an outburst. Eleanor ripped off her gloves, threw them on the floor, and glared. Benson gulped visibly at the furious expression in his mistress's eyes. Your Grace? Benson mumbled awkwardly. Never in his entire time as her servant had he seen the Duchess so enraged. Tell Rose to run me a bath, Eleanor demanded through clenched teeth. She was ordinarily very much inclined to keep her anger in check, but today was an exception. Burn these soiled gloves and do the same with the dress and everything else as soon as Rose has helped me take it off. Yes, Your Grace. Benson rushed off to do as he was told, all the while wondering what in God's name had happened to the Duchess. A riding accident. Obviously that much was clear, but by the fury she displayed, there had to be more to it. Eleanor, for goodness sake, what is going on? Henry asked from behind his wife. The Contessa at Henry's side frowned at her granddaughter's rigid back, then gasped audibly when Eleanor swiveled around to face them. Good Lord! Julia covered her mouth with a delicate hand. What happened to you? Eleanor pursed her lips and cocked her head before taking a deep breath and explaining what had caused the complete ruin of her dress, hair, and overall appearance. Again she put her hands to her hips when she answered, feeling with every word how the anger and righteous fury returned. I happened to run into the most obnoxious, rude, arrogant, unfriendly, and awful woman I have ever had the misfortune to encounter. But what on earth did you do to her? Henry asked, shocked. All I did was stop her stupid horse, which had thrown her off. I was at the wrong time and the wrong place. In short, my only crime was being polite to this absolutely thick-headed, bratty, foul-mouthed wench. Her grandmother was hard-pressed to suppress her smirk at the long string of insults coming from Eleanor's mouth. Why don't you go back to your newspaper, Henry? We have everything here in hand, the Contessa said to the flabbergasted lord. With her own clean hand, she led her filthy granddaughter upstairs to her rooms, all the while soothing the still fuming woman. With a shake of his head, Henry watched the women ascend the stairs, glad that Julia was there to take care of this catastrophe.
Oh, that was great. Poor Eleanor. Wrong place, wrong time. You're absolutely right with that.
Yeah.
Sophie was not nice.
Nope.
Great Great setup. Thanks. And that was from Fractures and Hinges. And last, we're going to hear from Alicia Gael. Alicia, thanks for being here as our special guest. Will you go ahead and tell us about the book and set up the scene for us? Oh, looks like you're...
Okay.
You're good.
Island is my debut novel. And I owe a big thank you to Jazzy because she's the first person that read my manuscript. And her feedback was invaluable. This scene takes place about 2/3 of the way through the book. 10 women have been lured to a remote private island. And one of them is a killer bent on revenge. So the question is, will anybody survive the weekend? Sunday afternoon. Having made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, no knives needed, the 5 women sat at the table to eat. 4 feared they'd be the killer's next victim. The 5th put on a good act, pretending to be frightened. All 5 sets of eyes darted around the table, inspecting one another. Who was the killer? Who would be the next victim? No one talked as they ate. Besides the occasional sound of soup being slurped and the whipping of the wind against the house, the room was quiet. Each one wondered if help would arrive before the killer struck again. Catherine placed her spoon on the table beside her bowl and looked at the others. I know it's very rude to leave the table before everyone is done, but I have a headache. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to go sit by the fire. I can give you something if you like, Dr. Emery offered. Everyone stared at her. Willie let out a laugh. Emery looked at her, hurt etched on her face. Catherine wiped her mouth and stood. No, thank you, doctor. I have Tylenol. I understand your reluctance to take anything from me, Catherine, but I assure you, I take my oath to do no harm seriously. Catherine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure Dr. Jekyll said the same thing right before he turned into Mr. Hyde. Emery looked down, shook her head, and back at Catherine. Please let me know if you need anything. Catherine gave Emery a curt nod and left the table. Willie popped the last of her sandwich into her mouth and chewed before speaking. If you ask me, she's the one we need to keep an eye on. Virgie leaned back in her chair. I agree. Why? Phil asked. Her twisted religious beliefs. We're all heathens and she's a sinner. We're all heathens and sinners, but she's a saint. And she has absolutely no remorse over her mother's death. Well, that could be said for thousands of people who ignore the plight of others, Phil said. That doesn't make them murderers. Then which one of us do you think is the killer? Willie asked. Phil looked from Willie to Emery. It's either you or you. She pointed from one to the other. Emery looked weary. I'm sorry you think I could harm someone. I'm also leaning towards Catherine, though. The woman's heartless. Virgie stood and began clearing the table. We never did search the house for the gun. We should do it now, Phil said. Do you really think the killer hasn't moved it? Willie frowned. Catherine's all alone in there. She could be hiding it as we speak. Phil let out a sigh. Maybe so, but searching the house will give us something to do besides sitting here staring at each other. She stood. Someone needs to stay with Catherine while we search. Any volunteers? Virgie, Willie, and Emery looked at each other. Can't be me, Emery said. She thinks I'm the killer. Willie and Virgie looked at each other. Rock, paper, scissors, Virgie suggested. Willie let out a laugh and shook her head. A child's game to decide who stays with the killer. Sure, why not? Best 2 out of 3, Virgie asked. Willie shook her head. One time for all the marbles. She held out her fist. Ready? Virgie nodded. 1, 2, 3. On 3, Willie displayed a flat hand. Paper. Virgie kept her hand balled into a fist. Rock. Paper smothers rock, Willie smiled. I win. Virgie entered the front room and spotted Catherine sitting in front of the fire. You're not dead. Catherine looked up. Yet? That's what you meant, isn't it? I'm not dead yet? Virgie plopped down on the stool at the bar on the opposite side of the room. I didn't think you would be. And why is that? My money's on you. Catherine's forehead wrinkled. I don't understand. Your money's on me for what? Virgie let out a laugh. That you're the killer. Catherine's eyes and mouth shot open. You're taking bets on who the killer is? No, of course not. But you think it's me. Virgie nodded. Then why are you here alone with me? Virgie crossed her arms. Because I lost a bet. Thanks.
Wow, that was awesome, Alicia. And I have to say, I was honored to be the first person to read this book and to help you out. It's been a great road for you, and you are getting the accolades that you deserve on it. So I thought it was a great murder mystery, and that's a really nice introduction that you just read to kind of get people used to the various characters in this, and the fact that no one knows what's going on, but they're afraid they're going to die next. Yeah. So thank you for that. Just want to let everyone know that we were also supposed to have one more reader today, K.L. Mitchell. Unfortunately, she had a power outage, so we'll have to get on to the live stream at a future event, but I wanted to at least mention her. And so I hope everyone enjoyed those readings. I thought they were wonderful. We got a taste of these talented writers' works, and I hope that you'll check them out, those who are watching us now or later on. Check out these fine writers and what they have to offer you. And luckily, we have a little more time, so I can ask them some cool questions, too. So let's start with a serious one. What inspired the idea for your book? So who wants to answer first? Okay, I'll pick one of you. Jane, what inspired your book?
Well, as I said, The Queen's Eye is the second in a sequel. And the first novel was The Crystal's Curse. And my two archaeologists went in search of the mummy of Hatshepsut, who was a little known but very powerful female pharaoh in ancient Egypt. And her existence had been poo-pooed by the establishment for a long time. And so Cass and Ari found her and got a lot of notoriety for that. And so Nefertiti came to mind. And instead of searching for her mummy, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting in looking at that incredibly beautiful bust, well-preserved bust, without the left eye, to figure out what happened to it. So it was just putting the puzzle together. It was like putting a puzzle together for me. It was fun to write.
Yes, and a great read, too. I know that your readers are going to love it. Who else? Who's next answering my burning question of what inspired the idea of your book? All right, Natty, go ahead, tell us.
In the Russell Leaves, it's been out a few years now, so I'm going to give a spoiler that isn't quite evident at the beginning of the book. But I had the idea of, wouldn't it be cool if there was somebody going around putting old people to rest because of their age, which is a really creepy idea. And so anyway, I created this family of people. They're not total blood family, but they created this family of people, and that's their whole purpose in life, is to go into a town and just start decimating old people and putting their essence into a box of souls. And every so often they bring out the box of souls and they sit with candles and they pay obeisance to these souls that have since passed on. And it's like this ritual kind of murder that they do. And the other thing that's a spoiler is I wanted it to be a woman serial killer. I wanted to have women doing this as well as men. And so this family is run by Adeline. I guess you figured that out from the prequel. And that's kind of what inspired me. It's just the idea that nobody had really done a lot of female serial killers. And when I was asked to write a horror book, I thought, let's go with that.
Oh, excellent. Hey, I see that KL popped in here. Hi, KL. How are you?
Oh boy. We had a mother of a storm here last night. I mean, it went on to like 4:00 in the morning, and
oh wow.
I got my power back, but on the other hand, I'm gonna have to go as soon as this is done, go buy a chainsaw because I got branches everywhere.
Oh boy. Well, KL, are you up for reading for us? We have a little more time.
Yeah, I'm just about pulling it up now. Everything's kind of coming together real
Okay.
fast. Okay. Yeah, here
I'm,
it is.
you're good? All
Yep,
right. Let's
I'm
hear it
good.
from you, right?
I'm
All
a
right. So
little discombobulated. I'm on the phone if you can't tell, but anyway.
that's
Okay.
all right. We're so glad you were able to make it. Why don't you tell us about the book and set up the scene? Go ahead and read for us.
All right, so the new book is called Hell and High Water and the Burning Eye. It's kind of my take on the old pulp novels, kind of Indiana Jonesy thing. The theme being what happens if some kind of reckless, globe-trotting treasure hunter type winds up partnering with a straight-laced actual archaeologist. So the protagonist is Helen Highwater. She's basically a freelance pilot and treasure hunter and just whatever takes money takes the hand. And in the first chapter, she spends it below the Aventine Hill, where she's found a long lost temple to Laverna, the Roman goddess of thieves and of darkness. And basically, long story short, she winds up recovering this mask that these employers have sent for her. And so my reading starts at the beginning of chapter 2, where she arrives to make the drop off. Okay. It was midnight in the Largo de Torre Argentina, and the cats were on patrol. The rendezvous point was a fenced in area about the size of a city block. Beyond the fence, a set of stone stairs led down to the recently excavated dig site. Since its unearthing a few years previous, a sizable portion of the city's feral cat population had claimed it as their own. By day, tourists would line the fence, gawking and taking pictures, actual access to the actual site being forbidden. But at this hour, there was no one else to see the motorbike as it purred to a stop by the locked gate. The woman eased herself through the fence and down to the stairs into the site, and then hurried down to the main center area where the ruins sat bathed in the moonlight. Around her, a small army of feral cats wandered round or lounged on the ancient stones, watching her pass. An elderly gray tom with fur so shaggy it could have been part sheepdog wandered up to her and growled. It snuffled at her, batted at her boot, and let her pass. The rendezvous spot wasn't hard to find. It was a circular area, backed by several broken pillars, right in the middle of the site. She approached the circle with caution, keeping an eye out for anyone of the non-feline variety. Of course, with all these ruins and things about, you could hide a good crowd of people if you had the mind to. She went up the stone steps and crossed the small grassy patch to the central circle. The streetlights didn't filter down here enough to see anything, so the full moon was doing most of the work of illuminating the scene. The silver-tongued light gave an unearthly feel to the place. That morning's excursion into the forgotten temple had been eerie enough in its way, but this truly felt like she was stepping from one world into another. Despite the mildness of the night, she shivered. What kind of crazy place is this? A temple, or rather, a grouping of temples. A figure emerged from behind a pillar. He was tall, dressed in a long black overcoat and a Homburg hat over his bald head. He stepped toward her, his wire-rimmed glasses catching the moonlight. Only recently recovered, too. It seems El Duce wanted to modernize the area and ordered a new apartment put up here. Then the workers found this, and he waved a hand over the site. He always spoke in a formal, somewhat stilted manner, with an accent she could never quite place. Voila, the assassination point of Julius Caesar. Quite a significant find, as I'm sure you will agree, Miss Highwater. Helen, she replied. Everybody calls me Helen. Good to see you again, Mr. Brenner. She slipped off her knapsack, looking around as she did so. I'm kind of amazed you didn't knock it all down. The man chuckled. Oh, very little chance of that. He loves nothing more than revisiting the old glories, except for linking himself to them, of course. I really think he would anoint himself Caesar if he thought he could get away with it. He laughed, a sort of subdued coming from the back of the throat. Now then, you have it? Helen pulled the mask out of her knapsack and stood up, holding it in front of her face. Ta-da! Excellent. That would indeed appear to be the item. Please be so good as to turn it around so that I may see the back. Helen raised an eyebrow at the request, but shrugged and complied. There was a click, and the light from a flashlight hit her full in the face. Of course, she should have realized there were more people there. It's all right, she reassured herself. It'll soon be over. Just hand over the mask, get the money, and blow. The light traced back and forth over the back of the mask. There was a short whispered conversation. She couldn't make out most of it, but the word Archimedes stood out a few times. The man called Brenner spoke. Very well, Miss Highwater. We are satisfied. Well done. Did it give you very much trouble? She smiled. Nothing an old Creole girl can't handle. So the money. Yes, yes, of course. William? One of the other strangers stepped forward and put down a small black bag. You may examine it. The one called William stepped back and nodded to her. She knelt before the bag and opened it up, setting the mask by her side. The money was there all right. That would keep her going for a while. She smiled. All right, she said, closing the bag again. I'm going to take the bag and leave the mask here. I'll clear out and you can do what you like. Sounds good? Of course. The words were quiet, spoken without effect, but something about them raised the hairs on Ellen's neck. She was used to dealing with shady characters, and she knew how to take care of herself, but something about this man was making her nervous. There was, she had noticed from time to time, sometimes a moment of forewarning, a feeling in the air when a deal was about to go south. Her hand crept back to the mask. To her right, there was a sudden sound of a scuffle. A cat had landed on a man hitherto concealed in a darkened area. As he swore and batted the cat off him, she caught a momentary glimpse of a sniper rifle as it caught the moonlight. Damn it! She snatched the mask and the money bag and darted backward, grabbing her rucksack as she went. She dove behind a crumbling wall just as the men opened fire. She swore to herself as she stuffed the goods in her bag, dug behind an old stone column, and tugged a revolver from her belt. Damn it, always have a gun ready, she scolded herself. You know this. She was maybe 10 meters from the steps, but getting there would make her a pretty easy target. Still, it wasn't like she had a choice. She scrambled from ruin to ruin, sticking to the dark when she could. Behind her, the men were closing in on her. Sounded like there were 4, maybe 5. Not good odds. She shuffled along the wall of the excavation area, moving as quickly and quietly as she could. Now there were more flashlights sweeping back and forth across the ruins. The men shouted instructions to each other as they began to comb the area. Sooner or later they would find her, and that would be it. Nothing for it, she decided. Time to make a break for it. A moment later, she was just a few feet away from the stairs. The path up was clear, but she'd have to be moving fast. There was another shout from Brenner, and one of the men started toward the steps. She was about to lose her escape route. Damn. Moving as fast as she could, she crouched behind a broken column and cocked the revolver, readying it. Best to wait until he was as close as possible and buy as much time as she could. She felt something brush against her. One of the cats had wandered over and was rubbing against her in a friendly manner. She shooed it away as gently as she could. Not now, fella, she whispered. Go away, shoo. The man crept closer, shining his light in every possible hiding space. Any second now. She licked her dry lips. Her finger moved to the trigger. Suddenly there was a horrible screech. The man, so intent on finding Helen, had neglected to watch where he was stepping and had trod on a cat's tail. It responded by screaming blue murder and launching itself toward his face. Man and cat flailed and screamed at each other, the altercation drumming up enough noise to wake the dead. Several cats, hearing their fellow in distress, ran to the attack until the man was in the middle of a small, angry, furry mob. Helen took the steps 3 at a time and scrambled over the fence just as 2 bullets whizzed by. She hit the street running and scrambled over to where her trusty bike was waiting. She revved it up, pulled down her goggles, and roared off into the night. Ta-da!
Oh, that was awesome, KL. I'm so glad we got to hear that from you today. I love that. It was so moody in the beginning with that description of where she was and the handoff, and you have that intrigue and the dangerousness, and then the cats to the rescue. Yes! Great job. Really love that. We have a couple more minutes left, so I'm going to ask one more question for our authors and have a few of them answer. And that is the also very important question. As a writer, what would you choose as your spirit animal and why? Why don't we have Alicia? Why don't you try that one on?
Might be weird for a spirit animal, but I think I would choose a seagull. So you can just fly long distances and look down and see what's going on, all over the place. Be
That's
kind of
not
nice
weird.
just to watch and look in on everybody else.
That sounds good to me. How about you, Edith? What would you pick?
Probably a cat.
Cat.
Since we already live and function under the paw in our podcast and so on, cats make sure you stay on track.
Yes. They are very intelligent, more so than some people give them credit for.
Yes, indeed.
And have been worshipped for many, many, many years.
Oh, yes.
How about you, KL? What would your spirit animal be and why?
I bet I know.
Okay, since cat was taken, I'm going to go with dolphin, actually.
Okay.
Because they look like they've got life figured out. I mean, let's be honest, they just muck about in the water having a good time. So,
How about you, Natty?
Cat or dolphin?
Okay.
They're both
Those-
taken, but I
those
like
are-
the way that cats just are there, their presence. And dolphins seem to have no fear. They just, frolic in the ocean. They're happy all the time. So, both of those.
Okay. All right. And Jane, what about you?
Yeah, mine is a zebra.
Oh, tell me why.
And, well, because they're sort of mysterious. I mean, what are they? Are they a horse with stripes? What exactly are they?
Mhm.
And secondly, they go in herds. They're together, very social. I
Mhm.
like to think about being very social with other people. And thirdly, they seem to be very peaceable. They're herbivores. They don't hunt. They don't stalk. They don't kill. It's sort of live and let live. So mine is a zebra.
Wow, I love that. And well thought out, Jane.
It's a hard question.
It is a hard question, but it's also a fun question. So, and we hadn't finished with the other question, which was what inspired the idea for your book. So I know we had a few people who hadn't answered that yet. So Alicia, you want to answer that one?
Well, my grandmother was a big fan of Agatha Christie, and she used to pass them on to me. And our favorite was And Then There Were None. So I have always thought it would be fun to rewrite it, make it contemporary, and give it an all-female cast of characters, and make it a little bit sapphic. So there's also a small romance running throughout the book, too.
Right. Great. Thank you. Edith, what about you? What inspired you?
Upstairs, Downstairs, a famous British television show, which aired when I was a girl. And of course, Downton Abbey, because there is a lot of downstairs going on in the book as well.
Mhm.
And of course, the fact that you should write what you know. And history is what I love. And I know a little bit about history, and I know a little bit about Vienna. So
Great.
why not bring it together?
And it was a good combination, I can say. And KL, you're last but not least, of course. What inspired you to write your book?
well, I've always kind of enjoyed the old classic pulp fictions, and even more so the sort of reinvent. We had sort of a mini renaissance of the format back in the 80s. I mean, not just Indiana Jones, but the Jewel of the Nile, and I would even count the original, the 1989 Mummy movie, or whenever that was, 99, whenever it was. You know the one I mean.
Yeah, I do.
That sort
Fraser.
of story has always appealed to me greatly, and I thought it would be fun to do something in that genre, and I'm hoping that I can do more in this series, basically.
No, great. Well, we're so glad you were able to read for us today, as we are for all of our readers. You did a great job today. Nice variety, too. And unfortunately, we are at the end of our program. So I want to thank all of you for being here today with me. Great job. I hope those who are watching will check out our authors. You can go to the Desert Palm Press website or the Launch Point Press website. Did I say Desert Palm? Yeah, I did. Okay, so and then Alicia Gael, our special guest, she's from Bella Books, so check her out too, of course. And we will have another live stream next month, June 23rd. That will be 2 authors where we'll be hearing them read from the works, and then also many questions. We like to grill them on those every other month, so I hope that you'll join us for that. Until then, thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a great long weekend. Bye.